Hey there, it's me, Julie Fei-Fan Balzer, and I thought I would record myself exploring Colorburst, which is a new product from Ken Oliver. So this is literally the first time I've ever used them, and you're going to get to see it all. So basically, these are pigment powders, and they come in these little squeeze bottles, and they're from, as I mentioned, from Ken Oliver Crafts, and they're kind of super fun. So I thought we would try it. So basically, what I did is I gathered the kind of supplies I thought I would need for pigment powders, and then I thought I'd see how it went. So the first thing is I have this cupcake palette, and I'm just going to go ahead and squeeze out some powder. Now I'm putting a little bit of powder into the yellow one, and I'm going to put a lot. Now you can see that my cupcake pan palette is stained from previous watercolor, but it shouldn't affect this at all. So when I say I put some in, oh, that's a really tiny amount in the blue, and that is a more hefty amount in the yellow. And then I'm just going to add some water with a spray bottle, and I figured I had heard that they were like watercolor, so we sort of figured how much we're going to see how much they are like watercolor. So I added a lot of water because I wasn't sure what the ratio was supposed to be. And one of the things that I did learn as I worked is that obviously the more water, the more translucent and light in appearance they are. So there you can see that's a very translucent, very light blue. And the yellow, which had more pigment powder, as you would notice, I used more of the color burst there. That is slightly deeper, but as you would expect from watercolor, it's translucent, and the blue and the yellow, where they overlap, are mixing slightly to create green, which is kind of a nice thing. So then I decided to add some direct from the bottle. You can see I'm just shaking it out there. You can also squeeze the bottle, and it comes out in kind of like a poof. And you can see it's wicking into the water and creating these kind of stripes and stretches, and it's right there. And that color is much more intense because it's direct from the bottle. So then I thought, well, if a little bit of water is good, why don't we flood the tag? And you can see, even though it's not in focus, that it is in fact flooding that tag, and that again the color is more intense because the pigment was put on there directly. So now I'm just drying it all up with a heat gun, and then I thought, okay, well, let's try to see if more pigment does in fact equal a darker color, right? You should always test your hypothesis. We are scientists of art after all. And of course, guess what happened? Oh baby, yes. So the if there's more pigment and less water, then with the color burst it's going to be a more intense color, or a darker in appearance color. So I'm doing splashes, I'm layering it, and again, it does everything that watercolor should. So again, I'm adding that same red straight out of the bottle, but this time I am not going to flood it with extra water. I'm just going to let it sit in the wet. I'm also adding some extra powder into the blue to see if I can mix the colors to create my own colors, because I do like color mixing always. And you can see that it is turning into more of a kind of navy color. So I have another tag here, and one of the reasons I love working with tags is they're a small surface, they're pretty hardy, and you can do a lot of layering on them. And these are just office supply tags, but there you go, there's that navy. It looks like watercolor, and here is the tag that we've done. And you can see that area where I added the red powder directly at the end. It doesn't look red, it just looks like a more intense area of color. That's sort of in that deep blue that's over there on that left side. So again, so far it's everything that I came to expect from watercolor. So now I thought, okay, instead of adding water, why don't we take some matte medium, which is a gel medium. This just happens to be my favorite in the whole world. And I'm just adding it right there onto palette paper. Now the reason I'm not working in the cupcake palette is because this is going to be permanent, because it's and I don't want it to dry in there, and palette paper is disposable. So I put a small amount in, and I'm sorry for the focus issues, you guys. I had some issues with the camera. It does resolve itself later in the video, and I apologize that this is coming in and out. But mixing the clear gel medium and the powder, what you'll see is I'm going to get a very translucent and light wash of color, which I'm making instead of mixing with water, which is making it non-permanent and it'll always be water reactive. Now I'm going to basically seal the color within that acrylic medium, okay? So now again, just like we did before with the blue, adding more, see how how much more powder I've added. And the theory here is that, again, with the matte medium, the color is going to get darker. You know, you can assume things about a product, but you always need to try them to make sure that it's definitely going to work the way that you think it is. People often ask me like how I figured out how different things work, and the answer is I didn't read anything, I didn't do anything, I just did exactly what you see me doing here. I just played with it, using basic theories on what I thought would happen to see what would happen. But there it is. You get your blue that is mixed with water, you get the dark green and the light green, which are mixed with the matte medium, so varying amounts of the color burst powders, so varying intensity of color. So now this is a brush loaded with water. And my theory is that the color burst powders are very much like distress ink, which is to say water reactive when mixed with water, right? So what I'm doing is, you can see I've covered the tag with water, and my theory is that basically the plain water is now going to wick away anywhere that was not sealed with the matte medium, that was not mixed with the matte medium. So I'm going to roll the paper towel over it, and you can see it's picking up some of that color, and boom, guess what, you guys? I was right. I like being right. Okay, so you can see that I was right, and right there it took away, but it did not take away in the area that was done with the matte medium, because that's acrylic and it's permanent. So whereas that background that was mixed with water is not. So remember, whatever you mix it with is the key here. So now I'm taking a stamp, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm stamping with Versamark, which is normally a clear ink, but I have a dirty Versamark pad, so you can see it, which is great, but that's why you can see it, is because I have a dirty pad, because I'm a dirty girl. Okay, so then I'm going to take that clear ink, and I'm going to throw some clear embossing powder. I know it looks white, but it's actually clear on top of it. And I'm actually just working on a piece of deli paper, because I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to dump that powder back into the container, because it's usable over and over and over again. So basically, embossing powder, if you've never used it, is tiny little particles of plastic. And when you melt it with a heat gun, which you can see the melting happening, it's changing color, it basically melts the little bits of plastic so they stick together and they stick there permanently. So there you can see you have a shiny, clear, sealed thing. Now, it's hard to tell it's clear because we put it on a tag and everything looks the same on the tag. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray this with water, and I just put a rag underneath because I knew I was going to flood the tag with water. And then I'm going to try putting some of the color burst powders directly on. Ooh, look at how intense that color is, again, direct from the bottle. So this is another learning thing that I'm sticking away in my head. It's intense when it goes direct from the bottle. But it's not wicking through the water as much as I thought. I'm not sure if I didn't put enough water on or whatever. So I thought I would maybe try to encourage it by dripping it, but that doesn't work as much, so let's add some more water and see if that works. It's still not moving quite as much as I would like it to. Partially, I think it's because that stamp design is somewhat enclosed. Maybe if I had used a less enclosed stamp design. So at this point, I just decided to grab a brush, and I'm just going ahead and using the brush to just go over the top. It's just a wet brush, and it's just taking that color on through, okay? So you can see now, if I just dry this off for a second, what it looks like. So now I'm going to add some more powder because I'd like some more color variation. It turned out more purple than I intended and not enough orange. So I'm going to go ahead and spray that through, and now you can see it's dripping on down. And again, if I dry it off, you'll see that wherever the embossing powder was, it was sealed again. So it avoided that color burst, which again is a water-soluble product. So it's like watercolor. So it's going to run around it. Okay. So then I thought I would try the same clear embossing idea, but on this tag that we did before, because now I figure instead of having the plain tag as the background, you're going to have this colored background. And so what will happen is it will seal it down. There's that clear ink on there. And I'm going to go ahead and put it in the clear embossing powder. Now, one of the reasons to keep your embossing powder in Tupperware is you can do exactly what I'm doing, which is instead of having to have the deli paper and pour it out, if you're doing a small area like a tag, you can just literally dip it in. And then I'm going to melt the embossing powder, and then I'm going to add some color to it and see what happens. So there's some orange, and let's go ahead and paint it on. By the way, I'm using a Sumi ink brush, which is just a really nice brush because it holds a lot of water. I would never use this with acrylic. I only like to use it with water-soluble products, so watercolor, etc., etc. So there you can see, pretty cool how, again, the embossing powder resists, and yet the orange is mixing with the other layers underneath the same way that watercolor would. I want more intensity of color, so I'm adding more to it. more powder, more layers. That's always going to add more intensity of powder. You know, I'm a more is more kind of girl. I always like things like that. Okay, this is a mini mister. It's just a mister. It's empty, even though it's stained red because it's been previously used, but you can see that it's empty. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of the powder, put it in. I'm going to take some water, spray it in. Then I'm going to put the cap on, screw it on, and shake, 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 shake. Then I'm going to spray, and guess what? I have made my own spray ink. Pretty cool how that works, right? Just like that. And this is going to be, again, a water-soluble spray ink. And then I happen to have some mica powders of all kinds. This is Perfect Pearls from Ranger, which is a great thing to use with a spray because it has a binder in it already. So I added some in, and I'm going to shake it around, and then I'm going to spray through a stencil, and then I'm even going to get a second print off my stencil by pressing a tag to that nice wet stencil. I put a rag down, which happens to be dirty, so it got my hand and the back of the tag, but who cares? Now, it's a little bit hard to tell that the mica powder is super shiny because things are also wet. So I'm just going to go ahead and dry this up with a heat gun, and then I will show you. Boom! Look at that mica. It's so shiny and awesome. I love it. Okay, so I added some spray also to this other tag because why the heck not? Because that looks awesome. And again, color intensity, layers are really key when you're working with translucent stuff. And then I had a theory, which is if you can mix it with matte medium, can you mix it with white acrylic paint? So we added some blue of the color burst, and we're pulling out some cool blue color. And again, the more white I mix in, the lighter it gets. And it works, seems to me, just like acrylic paint. So I'm going to go ahead and put it on. It's a somewhat translucent acrylic paint. It's not super opaque, which is fine, but that might also be that that white paint is somewhat opaque or translucent. I think whatever you mix it with is what you end up getting. So this is another stencil, and we're using it exactly like we would acrylic paint. You can see there's some stenciling on there. Pretty cool. So now basically these pigments are flexible to be whatever you want, right? You want to make it permanent, you want to make it not permanent, you're the boss of you. And then at this point, I just decided to use all the techniques that I've been using to sort of play around, have fun, continuing layering, stamping, stenciling, just seeing what I could do and what would happen, you know, water soluble, not water soluble. And also sometimes, you know, you're trying to figure out, by the way, this is a baby wipe that I used as my wetness as opposed to just water or anything. And you can see that the baby wipe spread the color around. It is translucent, but of course, where we had sealed, that's that green, remember, that we made with the matte medium, it is not going. Anyway, what I was going to say is I just always think like it's important to see if a product is something that you like or not. And you don't really know if you like it until you start to work in the style that you usually work in. So I thought I would do these tags in lots of layers, which is the way I normally work, to see how I felt about it. And so my analysis after playing with them on just a couple of these tags is that they're super fun. They're very color intense, and I like the idea of a product that's very customizable, meaning I can decide whether it's water soluble or not. I tend not to work with a ton of water soluble products. I used to use like Distress ink and Adirondack sprays and stuff all the time, dilutions. I just find now that I like a little more permanence. That said, I do like that you can make these permanent if you want to. So that's a great possibility. And I do like how well they how bright they are and fun and stuff like that. And I love the way that these tags turned out. So that's really cool. So I hope you'll consider Color Burst. If you've used it, let me know what you think of it. And as always, I hope you will visit me at my website at balzerdesigns.com for lots of tips, tricks, tutorials, and product reviews. Thanks so much.